how do we tap into our sensual energy? And can you give us like a good overall of like how to start taking them very first steps?
So speaking to sensual energy with regards to women, sensual energy, I really like working with things like archetypes. So just because it gives us, because, we have access to different ways of being, don't we? Because if you look at people that go acting, they're embodying something within themselves that they actually have access to, but maybe that they don't live with generally day to day. Because as human beings, we're capable of anything and everything. We really are. It's just that we hold back. Social norms prevent us from doing things. Morally, we don't do others. And so we have the full range of accessibility of everything. And it's like, so inside of us lives the archetype of the temptress. And so I like to suggest people play with her. And what the temptress is the temptress is like playfulness. She is magnetic. There's elements of seduction there. And so it's like, your own version of the temptress, like, what does she look like? What does she wear? How does she move? And finding music as well that really helps you to feel into your own inner temptress. That can really help with the embodiment process of her. And then other elements of connecting to sensuality that are a little bit more sort of like foundational, or things like just connecting to the body itself. And what I mean by that is, so often we are in our heads and thinking, but coming back into our feeling body, like, when we notice an emotion, where does it sit inside the body? And really, listening, getting intimate with that part of ourselves. When we start to build that relationship, we're then able to go even deeper with our sensuality, and then moving closer to like our genitals and feeling the sensations that come up there. Is the sexual energy? Is there maybe contraction? Tapping into that part of our body as like a place of consciousness. Like, what does she have to say about any particular thing that's going on in our life? Quite often people will communicate with their hearts for a place of wisdom. We use our minds a lot for logic and rationalization, but also like tuning into, when I feel into my pussy, like, what is it that she's saying? What is it that she wants? So really learning to, slow down and listen. And then there are other things sort of outside ourselves that we can do as practices to help, connect to that part of our sensuality even further. And, like I mentioned a moment ago, music, dancing, those things really help us to bring us back into our body. Things like self-pleasure practices. So, rather than just like going in with the vibrator, getting it over and done with, like slowing everything right down so that you're fully present with everything that you're experiencing, not rushing to playing with yourself, literally taking your time and getting to enjoy the feel of the touch of your skin on your own body. Other elements as well with regards to sensuality is, day to day, how are you looking after yourself in terms of pleasure? So are you looking for things that give you pleasure? And pleasure in the sense of, the foods that you choose to eat, when you're making your lunch, your breakfast, are you literally just diving in, the quickest thing that there is that day? Or are you taking your time and choosing things that are going to nourish your body? Because when you feed yourself from the inside out, that can also affect the energy that we have, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our body, our relationship to our body. And then when we're eating, taking that time to be present, to be mindful. And then other pleasures during the day, like, for example, really good one. I mean, it's raining today, so it's not really possible here to do it. But, when the sun's shining, can you take yourself outside for a moment and just sit with the sun on your face and really allowing yourself to feel that? So I think, with all of those different elements, it always comes back down to slowness, feeling, being present, with what is. So I would break it down and summarize it, in that.
Yeah. And I think as well, like if they can't necessarily tap in straight into taking everything slow, like starting off with one specific thing, like brushing your teeth really, really slow. Even if that's like the only slow thing that you do, at least it's that like first thing in the morning, first thing at night to just go super slow. And I really like the fact that you integrated like the food into pleasure, because I think there's so many people, but especially women as well, that really do struggle with like IBS. Forgive me, I don't know the rest of the terms. But I do think that that whole digestive system just reflect how you feel in your body.
Your relationship to your body, because when you have a good relationship to your body, when, no matter what your size, because this isn't relevant to size, so this is relevant to who you are as a human being, but when you feel good about your body and you have love and respect for her, then you're mindful of what products you choose to put on your skin. You're mindful of what you eat. And the reason that, and something that I want to speak to here is like the reason that size doesn't matter. When I did my training a few years ago to be a sex love and relationship coach, we had an element of it that was in person. And that was done in Costa Rica. So there was about 100 of us together, all women, and all different shapes. I mean, from their 20s all the way up to their 60s that had done this training. There were some athletic women who on Instagram have what most people would consider the perfect body, but you could just see this element of like discomfort in how they moved and how they held themselves. And so, there the inquiry is, what are they doing to themselves to have that perfect body? That perfect Instagrammable body. And then there were other women there that, were considerably larger, but just the way that they moved and the way that they held themselves, that they had full love for their own body, for their own sensuality. And so, yeah, it really isn't related to size. It is so much related to how you feel about yourself and the self-love that you give and the acceptance that you can give for all the parts of you. So external parts and internal parts. And what I mean by internal parts is loving yourself for making a mistake, getting things wrong, not always showing up in the best possible way, loving yourself in every place that you can do. That's what real self-love is. And so when you give yourself permission to be able to be in a place of self-love, and, we're not going to be there all the time. Like even the best of us like have moments when the inner critic comes in. But, if you have that ability to be able to move from that place of inner critic back into self-love and actually, yes, inner critic, I hear what you're saying. You had your place. And, this part of me is also true. Like, yes, I can show up. And these are the places that I have helped and supported people. And these are the places where I show up really, really well in my life. Like all of that gives you the opportunity to say, yeah, I can love all of my parts of myself, internal and external.
And love your inner critic as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because the inner critic, generally is there because it wants to keep you safe in some way. It's like, don't do that. Don't put yourself out there. And the reason it might not want you to go out into the big wide world and make yourself really, really visible is, because otherwise other people may attack you for it, because potentially in the past, jealousy from somebody else meant that you got attacked. So that inner critic is there to keep you safe. And it's like, okay, yes, I acknowledge an inner critic, that you are there, that you want to protect me and you want to keep me safe, and I accept that that's your role. And I'm now choosing, a different path, and I'm choosing to do it differently because, when I have been visible, the times that I have been visible, actually, these are the situations and I have been supported. And, it feels good to be visible, if that's the thing that the inner critic's holding you back on.
Yeah. What would you actually say about somebody who is feeling very scared about being visible?
I think it's really normal and common, especially for women. And there's various different points to that. I think socially speaking, the system that we live in very much is like, keep women good, keep women quiet. Something that was that I shared on my Instagram yesterday was that we have this idea and this impression that when women get older, so I'm in my 50s, that when women get older, like their opportunity for dating, for sex, for relationships, for pleasure is over the hill. Like you just won't get that. And like my personal experience of that, the women in my personal community, my work community, like clients, current clients, past clients, it's just simply not true. Like the women that I know, that I've worked with, that I'm working with, that are in their 40s, 50s, some of them in their 60s, they're actually having the best sex. They are, moved out of a relationship from from, a man that they wanted to have real deep intimacy with, and he just wasn't able to be that for her. And they find themselves with younger men. And this is, a really interesting thing. So like men in their like late 20s, 30s, are very, very interested and inspired to be with older women. And, and this is what I say, it's like two women don't, stay open-minded. And they're like, yeah, but if they're younger, they're more immature. And that's not necessarily always the case. Actually, a lot of younger men have been to therapy, experienced counseling, into self-development, look after themselves, a lot more aware socially, a lot more self-aware than, men in their 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond. And so, so I think those social elements, the things that we have been told that we think are true are actually like not true. And so going back to the visibility thing, it's like, we get this idea and this impression because a lot of the women on TV tend to be younger women, that once, you're an older woman, that you're no longer attractive. And it's like, it's not true. The actual reality of what I see day to day and what is going on is it's absolutely not true. And so that prevents older women from being visible because they think, I'm not supposed to be, I'm not allowed. And it's like, actually, it's the confidence that you have as an older woman. It's that is the thing that's appealing. And that, women that are in their 20s and 30s may not have in the same way that sense of confidence. They don't have that in the same way. And that is what's actually attracting men of all ages, including the younger men. Another thing with regards to visibility is, how we're brought up, like with regards to our caregivers, how they speak to us. Be a good girl, don't speak out, sit there, be quiet. It's something that we're quite often taught of as children. Be seen, not heard. So be seen as in like be present, but don't speak, don't be too much. And, a lot of the women that I work with, a lot of the women, in my community very much have this fear of, being too much. And the thing that I say, and you probably heard it yourself as well, Tegan, is like, when we shine our light and when we give, ourselves a full opportunity to really stand out in our full authentic self, it gives other women permission to do exactly the same. So it's like shine your light, you give other women permission to shine theirs too. And you do absolutely get that. Do you also get the odd person, including woman, that's going to criticize you and put you down? Yeah, you do. But generally, that those women, it's because, there's that sense of seeing the person shine in their light. They would like to do the same. But there's something within inside them that says like, it's too unsafe, it's too dangerous. And so they project that fear onto the woman that's shining. And the thing is as well, when you do become more visible and you do become more authentic, you end up attracting your tribe, the people that really resonate with your way of thinking, your way of being. And so, from that point of view, visibility is really important. Any other ways with regards to visibility? I think partners can stop us from being visible. I think a man with low self-worth and low self-esteem, if his partner is doing really well and he feels he's not doing as well as his partner, he can say things, to keep her down, gradually pick away at her confidence, prevent her visibility, because there's a fear of if she becomes too visible, she won't want me anymore. She might leave. And that fear of loss, that fear of abandonment can mean that he can, gradually pick away at that. I think just it's something that's socially that's been there for quite a while. If I think of like, religion and the churches, women were always sidelined, they're hardly mentioned in the Bible. And then when they are mentioned, it's not necessarily in a positive light. You've either got like on one side, the Madonna, who is, Mary, the Virgin. And then on the other side, you've got women that are, whores basically. So it's like the whole Madonna or whore. That's the only label that the choice of labels that women have. And if you are visible, then you're more likely to be labeled, on the side of the whore. Yeah, exactly. There's also the witch wound. I'm not sure if like you've heard of that, but here in Europe back in, I think it was the Middle Ages, where women were persecuted for being medical herbalists, healers, what then came to become like doctors and scientists. Women had a lot of those roles because originally they were very caring roles, and then they became more sort of academic and scientific. But while women were in those roles, they held a lot of power. The Catholic Church at the time didn't like women having that power, and so decided to name those women that were visible in their community as witches. And it did lead to other women having to denounce women in their community. Sometimes, what's the word? Sometimes they lied and said that a woman was a witch just to be able to protect themselves or to take the attention away from themselves and put it onto another woman. And so that witch wound, that lives still in the DNA of a lot of women. Don't stand out amongst other women. Don't be too visible, because then, there's the risk of being attacked.
Mm.
But I really see a lot of women making really concerted efforts to support other women who are wanting to be visible, who are really putting themselves out there as well when it comes to visibility, and getting very, very uncomfortable and making, every effort to heal those wounds within, and, put themselves against a wall, an obstacle, which is, the people in the society around us that still isn't quite ready for women to be visible. So, yeah, that's how I see it, and how I would say, those are the elements that stopping women from being visible.
Going back to like Florence Nightingale vibes. Like, I wonder how many women was empowered by her and also did the same, but was in secret. Because like now we see like that version to us now is like women showing up on Instagram and like TikTok and whatever, sharing something brave and bold and wonderful that then like almost gives that permission slip to somebody else who needs that, to be like, there's always got to be like that one person that starts it for it to then flourish. But I don't think any human is ever not seen anyway. You know what I mean? Like, you are still alive. You have still been seen. Whether you wanted to or not, like, you've still been there. You might have been degraded and, like, spoke to like crap, but, like, you were still there. Like, you was never not invisible, even if you felt like you were. Hey girlies, just a quick one. I am building a phenomenal community, and if you'd like to be a part of it today, you can go to the link in my bio and download free mirror work affirmations, and they are phenomenal. They are transformative. You will love them, and continue enjoying this interview. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, maybe not now, but definitely in the past, like, lots of authors, female scientists as well, for their work to be published, had to put a man's name onto it. Like, that was really, really common for them to be taken seriously, to be respected. The work was actually done by a woman with, a man's name for it, like as a pseudonym, or literally their husband took the credit for the work so that the work could get out there. And so, yeah, I think society finds it really difficult to take women's work seriously. I've got a friend, and she's got 4 science companies, and when she's looking for investment as a female, and when she's looking for investment, she looks at, she's got so many clients waiting for the product that she's wants to launch, and then there's the investors that that she's pitching to, and even though she's got clients ready and waiting to go, she still doesn't get the same amount of investment as a man who doesn't have all the clients, who comes up with some idea that they don't even know if it's going to work, and the man will get the investment. So this very much this unconscious bias that we have around women's capabilities, women's abilities. And if a woman is visible, it does make a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And yeah, it is about like checking in with ourselves and understand, noticing, I'm noticing this woman in a position of power. What's that bringing up for me? Like, what discomfort, and where's that coming from? Like, where's the message?
Why do you think we feel so much discomfort if that happens?
Because of all of the messaging that we get, so I listen to people locally to me, and, men that frequently say, and, you're getting these messages from a very, very young age, oh, women can't do this, women can't do that. If she's a woman that does this, it means that about her. So when you're like taking this information in on a very frequent basis, little comments here and there, you happen to be in the room, you're overhearing it, it's difficult not to take that on and make it mean something about you as a woman, but also not to project it onto other women as well. I think that's just like a normal human response. You know, you soak up the environment that you're living in, which is why it's important that, you know, do actually take themselves and go, okay, you know, my visibility isn't just for me, it's for all the other women as well, to give them permission to do it.
Lovely. How do you think women keep going when they've had so many fallbacks, or if they experience so many fallbacks?
I think everybody experiences failures, and that's the thing. And this is where, you know, like as parents, you know, for those people listening that are parents or working with children, I think one of the most important qualities that you can teach them over anything that they'll learn in, you know, the national curriculum, like resilience is the most important thing. Because with resilience, you know, and resilience is like trying, taking a risk, failing and getting back up again, maybe trying again. And sometimes also, you know, the wisdom is knowing when to quit as well, you know, like, so it's also understanding that, or, you know, what can I do differently? How can I take this as a learning experience? And so, yeah, I think resilience is important to everybody, not just women.
For sure. How does that like reflect back to home life and bedroom life? Feeling sexy or not so sexy? And how can you keep that strong sensual power within you, even if like your life is falling apart at work? Or
So that's like a massive topic, and it really depends in which direction that you want to go in. Because the thing is, you know, how we are as human beings is going to affect, there are always threads that are affecting and seeping through into every different area of our life. So if you're somebody that like really worries about what people think, and you know, you tend to be a bit of a people pleaser, you tend to self-abandon, you make decisions based on, you know, other people's ideas of what you should do, you're going to take that through in lots of different areas. So in the bedroom, if you're a man, you know, you're likely to have performance anxiety because you're so worried about like, is she liking it? Does she like me? Does she like my body? That things are going to get really stressful for you, and it's going to be difficult to get an erection. If you're a woman, you know, similar thing. You're so worried about like, does he like me? Does he not? People pleasing, you know, depending on things like attachment style. Maybe you end up moving away because of fear. Maybe you end up clinging because, you know, you're so afraid of being abandoned that you like cling on to the person, which then freaks them out, and then they push away, which makes you want to move in even more because of fear of abandonment. And those same patterns we can end up playing out in work as well. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you have, you know, those insecurities going on and you take them into the workplace, it means that you can end up, you know, self-abandoning to a line manager, to a boardroom, you know, to people at work that don't fully appreciate or acknowledge who you are and what you do. So you might end up over-giving because you're waiting for somebody to validate you and your experience, and you're like so over in your head, worried about everything that you're wearing a mask, and you know, don't really show up, you know, as authentically as you can. And there's so much of a fear there with regards to how people view you that you end up becoming somebody that you're not, you know, and that's really stressful to maintain. Like, you know, trying to pretend, whether you're in the bedroom or at work, trying to pretend that you're somebody that you're not is really, really exhausting. Then you attract people that are attracted by that mask, and they're not your real people. So you never feel like really fully connected to them. So that also becomes tiring, and that also creates more self-doubt because it's like, you know, this person isn't even a really, really great friend, and I can't really trust them. So that taps even more into the feelings of like low self-worth or low self-esteem, whatever it is that you might be. And then, yeah, and because, you know, the another thing that I've noticed as well is like how good we are with things like our boundaries and asking for what we want, you know. So if we're generally not that good with that in our work life, often it can be quite similar in our, you know, personal life. The things, you know, in the areas might be slightly different, but underneath it is because we either don't have very good boundaries, you know, or we might be able to say a boundary, but like not maintain it. You know, and we say to people we don't want something, they ignore it, and we just let them get away with it. So then they always think that they can do that. And then sometimes we're just not asking for what we want. You know, we don't ask with conviction because we're not necessarily convinced ourselves, because maybe we feel deep down that we don't deserve it or we're not worthy. And so what I find is when I work with people, even though I'm working on their sex and relationship issues and their dating problems, like that real deep work and connection to self automatically impacts how they're going to show up at work. And, going back right to the beginning of our conversations, one of the reasons for that is because they're learning to feel. Learning to feel all of the different parts of themselves, have compassion for themselves, coming back to like, true self love, which is loving all of those different parts of yourself. When you can get in the bedroom and, you get going, things are feeling really good. And then as a man, just, something pops into your head, your erection goes. Like, if you can go, "Oh, my erection's gone, let's just do something else until it comes back." And you're like, okay with that. That self-confidence then is easily going to be transmitted into work, because it's like, okay, I'm at work, something happens, I make a mistake, something doesn't go quite the way it should. I acknowledge that. Okay, I know how to do it differently. Let's move on. I'm not punishing myself. I'm not hanging there. I'm not staying in shame. Two situations that are very similar, but also extremely different circumstances, but they're very similar. And it's like, if you can learn to do that in the most intimate parts of your life, which, sex and relationships are the most intimate parts. Like, if you can learn to do it there, it automatically translates into the workplace.
I really like the quote, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Because like once you start healing one part, it then shows up everywhere because it is within you. So you're going to experience that wherever you are, regardless of the external situation. When a client first comes to you, I feel like that is the common denominator that everybody that comes to you has to go back to.
Often authenticity, self-compassion, and self-trust.
When you're trying to find their authentic self, do you ask them some questions, or like what is that process of them finding themselves?
So, well, that's not done in just one conversation. That's like part of the work. So that's over like a series of months. But a lot of it is connecting to the parts of them that are preventing them from doing the thing that they want to do. So, whether if they have performance anxiety, if sex is painful, that there's something else that's going on there that's happening, something within inside themselves that's preventing or stopping something from happening. And it's like, once we've, found that part of them, once we've like acknowledged, accepted, worked with them in whatever way that part needs support, then underneath that, we're getting closer to the actual self, like that, the person, the original essence from which, that we were created.
Nice. Okay. And what about like their truth? Do you then find from their essence, do you really then start being able to figure out their values and what they believe in? Or can you do that before they have to go back?
I think everyone has a general sense of like their values anyway.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people have like their own sense of, what they think is right, what they think is wrong, what they do want. That can shift over time, because when you start to have compassion for yourself, when you start to become aware of your own judgments, which are a reflection of how you feel about yourself, when you judge other people, it reflects what's going on internally for you. So once you start to have that awareness, then it does, help you to understand a little bit more, what is my truth? And the thing is, we can come back to quite often, our thinking brain and cognitively, like, what would be the logical solution here? If I write a list of pros and I write a list of cons, what's the best thing? And we can end up like listening to so many different people, getting so many different pieces of advice. And that can just keep us in our head, confused and really not understanding the next step. But then when you really slow down and you listen to your own body and you ask the question to your body, then you can, that's where you can find the different inner critics, the different voices. And then it's like, deciding which one is coming from a place of like trauma or protection, and which one is, your more authentic truth, the one that wants to guide you to on the next path, on the next direction.
Yeah, because say if somebody is really not like vibing with life, so they're not having very much sex, or, they're just trying to like hide rather than like go out and live their life. They're not really taking very good care of them. Their identity there, they would probably think that they are like potentially lazy, they don't care, and all of these other things. So then if they then chose their own values and habits that they wanted to then pull into their life, it's like, would you still class that as a mask, or would you class that as like a transformation?
Explain that again. If they
To change, it's like, how do they and then they have changed, but it still feels a bit of a mask because they've had to mask it because they was in such a bad place where, I don't know, they weren't showering, they weren't going out, there was just binge eating like crap food and just watching films and not having any social interactions. And then they've not done that. They've started going to the gym, like showering twice a day, like doing all of the things that make them feel really good. It's then like, even though this is the mask, because we've forced ourselves to do these things because they're uncomfortable. And then it's like, how do you, if you're that person who's gone through a bit of a transformation and now those habits are their life, like they can't go back to that person, it's like, how do you then find the authentic self?
I think if you are looking after yourself, you're already on the path to authenticity. Like I think the thing is when you are in a place where you're not looking after yourself, that because that sounds more like somebody who's depressed, that somebody, when you're depressed, you're in like a functional freeze state. So it's like your body's like shut down and it's a form of self-protection. And, to get out of that, you need to take small steps of action until you're actually able to start functioning again. And it is small steps, to be able to move through that. And so it's very much about, taking those small steps. But at the same time, it is, even though you're doing the things physically on the outside, also, I think if you're taking such radical shifts, you're going to be also taking a look on what's happening on the inside as well, because you're going to be thinking to yourself, "Oh, I used to not socialize. I need to socialize now because I need to feel good. I need to surround myself with people." So I think already an element of self-awareness has started and you're already on that journey. Um, yeah, I wouldn't see it as necessarily a mask. It's a mask if you're doing it to avoid feeling some pain that you're not acknowledging.
Okay, interesting. I like that. Yeah, for sure. Do you think sensuality is the most important thing in your life?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I've never even thought of that. I think it's just another element of like being a human being. It's another part of ourselves. So, there are so many different elements to who we are as humans. And I think, yeah, again, if we take that as a part of ourselves, we can't ignore it. We can't hide it. We can't avoid it. It is a case of, yeah, you just need to connect to that part, understand your own fears, your own desires, your own ways of showing up, and then like love that part of yourself and, heal wherever it needs healing. Yeah. So I would say it's one of the elements of which you need to take care of which there are many in your life.
And could you give us some examples of like a really confident person versus a not so confident person, and what the two different things look like? And how, if somebody's really not feeling confident, what's like one thing? Do you know how we said like brushing your teeth really slowly in the morning? That's how they're like slowing down. What's like one thing to show up with a bit more confidence about yourself?
So yeah, so you don't get confidence. Confidence isn't something that you wait to happen. You have to do the thing that you don't want to do that feels uncomfortable, and you maybe need to do it a few times before you get confident. So for the person that doesn't feel confident, it's like you just need to do the thing. Like just do it and do it more than once, and then that's when the confidence comes in. So it's like if you want to do something, take action and just do it.
Yeah, for sure. And so if that was for somebody that was in their sex life, for example, would you say just try and say if they were single, what would your advice be then? Like just go out on your first date or send that first message or
Yeah, take action. Absolutely take action. And the thing is, things don't always work out in the way that we want them to. And we need to get used to rejection as well. Whether you're a man or a woman, like rejection's really important to get used to, So, if you're approaching someone that they might not be interested, maybe you're exchanging messages and then they suddenly ghost you. It's all
Mhm.
part of the process. And it's like not taking it personally, it doesn't mean anything about you quite often. When somebody, changes their mind, it's quite often a lot to do with them, how they feel about themselves, their own worthiness, their own fears, their own stuff that's coming up. Yeah, it's very, very rarely about the other person. It's normally about, themselves. Yeah.
And do you have anything that can like say if somebody's just been rejected and they're like, "Oh my word," do you have any like go-to self-soothing techniques to go through that?
So my invitation is always like to take a moment just to be with it. And it's like, what are the stories that are coming up in your head? How does it feel in the body? Potentially there might be some shame there. What are you telling yourself about yourself? What are you saying about the other person? And just, yeah, bringing awareness, noticing all of that, feeling it all, and then move on.
Yeah, I've experienced that a lot of my male friends struggle more with intimacy than my female friends. And I feel like the narrative is men will have sex with anything and anyone, whereas women are much more selective and things like that. And whilst I do think that is still potentially has truth behind it, what do we think in terms of like men feeling more intimate with a woman, and what can like a woman do to make them feel more comfortable potentially? Or is that just, I
Yeah.
don't know
So,
why they're struggling so bad with that, because it's like a significant amount of them.
and in your friends are what, in their 20s?
Yeah, 20s and yeah.
Yeah, so it's because it really is different depending on like the age group and stuff. So men of that age, I think we have this idea as women that men are really confident, especially in the bedroom, and men also have this idea that other men are really confident in the bedroom, and like the reality is they're not. They can really, especially if they really like someone, they can really worry about what she thinks of them, like, especially what she thinks of his performance, if he's doing the right thing. Um, even the men that are like looking to get women on their like notches on the bedpost, let's call it, those men, the ones that are really going for it have low self-worth and are looking for external validation because there's something inside them that's deeply missing. And they get to a point in their lives where all of a sudden they realize that that they've done this, and there was probably one or two women that they would have liked to have relationships with, but they didn't have the capacity because they didn't know how to show up in that way. And those men are really like in a lot of pain. And, we can feel as women used by those men. And, I like to really turn the narrative here and like, okay, their behavior isn't appropriate, especially if as a woman, if you're under the if you've had a discussion and he's like, yeah, I'm into having a relationship, you have sex and then he like disappears, not appropriate behavior, absolutely needs to be held accountable. If you're showing up as a woman to have sex with a guy that's very, very like clear on this is just sex, and then you end up having feelings for him, he was very clear at the beginning that it was just sex. And it's like, acknowledging that, like, as long as he's being honest and truthful. The problem is a lot of women sometimes will go with a guy, have sex and think he might want a relationship with me now. And it's like, trust what a man says. If he says that he just wants sex, then that's what it is. Don't try and convince otherwise. So yeah, I think for women particularly, and for a lot of men, is this misunderstanding that men are extremely confident when they're not, and men are expected to know what to do and how to do it. They tend to use porn for education, and like it's far from the actual truth of like how women's bodies work. And the problem is what this does is it leaves a lot of younger women feeling like their bodies are broken. Just as an example, like only 20% of women can orgasm from penetration alone. And so because men watch porn and they see women having orgasms from barely any clitoral stimulation, or if it is, it's really fast and quite erratic, which most women don't want or don't get off on that type of touch. So what happens is, because a lot of men are doing those sorts of things to women's bodies, women are then going, there's something wrong with me because he's doing this and this should feel good, but it's not feeling good. And the big problem is too many women fake orgasms. And the problem that creates is if a guy goes from woman to woman, these women are faking orgasms. Then when they come to a woman who's like not faking an orgasm, she thinks she's broken and he thinks she's broken as well. Because it's like, well, everybody else got off on that. And, you know, the whole faking orgasm thing is, yeah, it's a real serious problem because, you know, of 30 to 60% of women, it depends on the study that you look at, only 30 to 60% of women have orgasms in partnered sex, and 90% of men do. So, you know, that's what's called the orgasm gap. And so bearing that in mind, it's like, if only that small number of women are actually having orgasms in partnered sex, there's a huge number that are faking it and leading men to believe that they're good in bed when they're actually on. And it's like, how can men be supported with education? And women need to learn to speak up for themselves and to say what they like and what they don't like. Women need to be touching their own bodies to know what's pleasurable and what isn't, so that then they can share that information with their partner. One of the reasons being is for women, you know, each woman is different and what each woman likes is different. And then, you know, for women that have a menstrual cycle and they're not on any, you know, birth control, as your cycle fluctuates, what you like and what you don't like changes. So one week, one type of thing really gets you off. The next week, it's something completely different. So if you don't have communication, like, communication is the key and the foundation to a good sex life. Like, you know, and the thing is around communication is it's uncomfortable. You have to be authentic. You need to be good at listening. You need to be good at validating somebody else's experience. And you need to be really good at, like, this isn't personal to me. They're not having an attack. They're looking after themselves. And so, yeah, that in more or less of a nutshell is, like, you know, what's happening a lot with regards to intimacy, communication, and yeah, a lot of it comes from miseducation as well. It's always good to talk before sex, not literally just before, but like have conversations before you get even close to the bedroom about what you like and what you don't like, you know, because the thing is as well, when you're dating, if you've got like real specific kinks that you want and somebody else is very super vanilla, like, you know, you need to have these sorts of conversations and you're looking for both of you are looking for a long-term relationship. It might not work. You know, who's going to compromise there? You know, so having conversations way before you even get in the bedroom is really important. Having conversations like, you know, when you've had sex, like a day later, when you're not in the bedroom, again, is really important. When you are like in the actual act of sex, communication is still important. And the reason it feels uncomfortable is because we're not used to doing it. And there's different ways of doing it. Like, the worst thing that you can say to someone is this good? Because what does that mean? And it could potentially be better. It puts the person in their head. They're like, oh, how do I answer this? Because, you know, if they were a little bit to the left or if they're a little bit to the right, it would be better. You know, and you end up the person that's just been asked that question, getting yourself into a right tizzle. And so the questions to ask are always giving people options. You know, do you want it a little bit more to the left or to the right? Do you want more pressure, less pressure, more speed, less speed? You know, do you want me to continue on this area of your body, or would you like me to move to this area? And the thing is, when you give people options, they might not even choose that option. They might give you something else, but you've given them permission to speak up for themselves.
Beautiful.
And it doesn't affect the flow. In fact, what it does is it gives the person that's being asked, it gives them permission to speak up more for themselves, because it's like, this person cares about how they touch me. I can ask for what I need or what I want. I feel safe.
Yeah, I so see that. That's gorgeous. Love that. Sensational. How can somebody start working with you today if they wanted to?
So I run women's circles in the northwest of England. I've got a retreat coming up for women next year in spring, the Unapologetic Woman. That information for those things are on my website. The women's circles are sex, dating, relationship themed. And then I work with individual women, I work with individual men, and I work with couples as well, all in the realm of sex, relationships, communication, dating, all of those things. And people can find me on my website, which is carlacrivaro.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook with the same. And then my Instagram handle is at the.sexuality.sanctuary.
Stunning. And I will link them all as well in the description. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tegan. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.